Chapter 29 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Daisy 55. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 29. Reaping leads to revelling. Although I was under interdict for 2 months from my darling, one for your sake, one for mine, she had whispered with her head withdrawn, yet not so very far from me. Lighter heart was not on Exmoor than I bore for half the time, and even for 3/4. For she was safe, I knew that daily by a mode of signals well contrived between us now, on the strength of our experience. "I have nothing now to fear, John," she had said to me as we parted. "It is true that I am spied and watched, but Gwenny is too keen for them, while I have my grandfather to prevent all violence, and little Gwenny to keep watch on those who try to watch me. And you, above all others, John, ready at a moment, if the worst comes to the worst." This neglected Lorna Doone was never in such case before. "Therefore do not squeeze my hand, John. I am safe without it, and you do not know your strength." I knew my strength right well. Hill and valley scarcely seemed to be step and landing for me. Fiercest cattle I would play with, making them go backward, and afraid of hurting them, like John Fry with his terrier. Even rooted trees seemed to me but as sticks I could smite down, except for my love of everything. The love of all things was upon me, and a softness to them, and a sense of having something, even such as they had. Then the golden harvest came, waving on the broad hillside, and nestling in the quiet nooks scooped from out the fringe of wood. A wealth of harvest such as never gladdened all our countryside since my father ceased to reap, and his sickle hung to rust. There had not been a man on Exmoor fit to work that reaping hook since the time its owner fell, in the prime of life and strength, before a sterner reaper. But now I took it from the wall, where mother proudly stored it, while she watched me, hardly knowing whether she should smile or cry. All the parish was assembled in our upper courtyard, for we were to open the harvest that year, as had been settled with Farmer Nicholas, and with Jasper Kebby, who held the third or little farm. We started in proper order, therefore, as our practice is. First the parson, Joshua Bowden, wearing his gown and cassock, with the parish Bible in his hand, and a sickle strapped behind him. As we strode along well and stoutly, being a man of substance, all of our family came next, I leading mother with one hand, in the other bearing my father's hook, and with a loaf of our own bread and a keg of cider upon my back. Behind us Annie and Lizzie walked, wearing wreaths of cornflowers set out very prettily, such as mother would have worn if she had been a farmer's wife instead of a farmer's widow. Being as she was, she had no adornment except that her widow's hood was off, and her hair allowed to flow as if she had been a maiden, and very rich bright hair it was, in spite of all her troubles. After us the maidens came, milkmaids, and the rest of them, with Betty Muxworthy at their head, scolding even now, because they would not walk fifthly. but they only laughed at her, and she knew it was no good to scold, with all the men behind them. Then the Snows came trooping forward, Farmer Nicholas in the middle, walking as if he would rather walk to a wheat field of his own, yet content to follow lead, because he knew himself the leader, and signaling every now and then to the people here and there, as if I were nobody. But to see his 3 great daughters, strong and handsome wenches, making upon either side, as if somebody would run off with them, this was the very thing that taught me how to value Lorna and her pure simplicity. After the Snows came Jasper Kebby and his wife, new married, and a very honest pair they were, upon only 100 acres and a right of common. After these the men came hotly, without decent order, trying to spy the girls in front, and make good jokes about them, at which their wives laughed heartily, being jealous when alone perhaps. And after these men and their wives came all the children toddling, picking flowers by the way, and chattering and asking questions, as the children will. There must have been 80 of us, take one with another, and the lane was full of people. When we were come to the big field gate, where the first sickle was to be, Parson Bowden heaved up the rail with the sleeves of his gown done green with it, and he said that everybody might hear him, though his breath was short. In the name of the Lord, amen. Amen, so be it, cried the clerk, who was far behind, being only a shoemaker. Then Parson Bowden read some verses from the parish Bible, telling us to lift up our eyes and look upon the fields already white to harvest. And then he laid the Bible down on the square head of the gatepost, and despite his gown and cassock, 3 good swipes he cut off corn, and laid them right in onwards. All this time the rest was huddling outside the gate and along the lane, not daring to interfere with Parson, but whispering how well he did it. When he had stowed the corn like that, mother entered, leaning on me, and we both said, "Thank the Lord for all his mercies, and these the first fruits of his hand." And then the clerk gave out a psalm verse by verse, done very well, although he sneezed in the midst of it, from a beard of wheat thrust up his nose by the rival cobbler at Bredon. And when the psalm was sung, so strongly that the foxgloves on the bank were shaken like a chime of bells at it, Parson took a stoop of cider, and we all fell to at reaping. Of course I mean the men, not women, although I know that up the country women are allowed to reap, and right well they reap it, keeping row for row with men, calmly and in due order. Yet meseems the men must ill attend to their own reaping hooks, in fear lest the other cut themselves, being the weaker vessel. But in our part, women do what seems their proper business, following well behind the men, out of harm of the swinging hook, and stooping with their breast and arms up, they catch the swatches of corn, where the reapers cast them, and tucking them tightly together with a wisp laid under them, this they fetch around and twist, with a knee to keep it closed, and lo, there is goodly sheaf ready to set up in stooks. After these the children come, gathering each for his little self, if the farmer be right minded, until each hath a bundle made as big as himself and longer, and tumbles now and again with it in the deeper part of the stubble. We, the men, keep marching onwards down the flank of the yellow wall, with knees bent wide, and left arm bowed, and right arm flashing still, each man in his several place, keeping down the rig